we will get started with the evolution of editing. First, I want to introduce Christina. Most of you know her. We've been working together for years now, but Christine is a successfully published author and has been through the whole step-by-step process of editing and getting an agent and being published and doing all those fantastic things that we all dream about. So, Christina, can you just walk us through what your experience has been like and what we're talking about today?
Sure, yeah. So Joellen has asked me to put myself out there, and I'm going to show you my actual spreadsheet from my first novel that I made while I was editing. So I've written 5 novels, and 3 are from the Stone Mountain series. So we're going to cover the first one in that series. We'll start with that one because that's the one I started early days when I had, like many of us, I think, I'm going to write a novel. How hard can that be?
Oh, easy.
Yes, I know.
So easy.
I know. I actually thought that. Seriously, first things I've ever had to do. So yeah, really hard, and editing it just as hard. So I thought I would just back up a little bit and go through that story of, I actually wrote 3 novels before I got an agent. So it took me quite a long time. And then I got my agent, and she recommended that the 3rd novel in the series should really be the first novel in the series. So then I rewrote the whole thing, putting the 3rd one first. So a big, long drama there. But after I did that, my first novel, Descent, was shortlisted for Crime Writers of Canada. And my second novel, Blaze, was shortlisted for the yes, and I know that association in the UK. Sorry, that's terrible. It was a big moment. I don't know. I just blanked on that. And so at that point, because I'd gotten shortlisted, right at the same time, I had a story published in the Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine, and I won the Canadian Capital Crime Writers for Best Short Story that year. So I had a whole bunch of things that just happened at the same time within maybe 2 months of each other. And so that's when I got a publisher and started working with an editor for, I had a little bit of an editor, like a critique editor through my agent, but then with my publisher, then I had an editor really focused on my book. So quite eye-opening. But to get there, I did a lot of editing on my own. So this is a book we're going to look at today. Hopefully you can read it. So that's Descent. It's a murder mystery that obviously takes place in a ski resort because I worked in a ski resort, and I was the director at the time, and I ran the guest services group, which takes care of all the people, and I ran the security services, which takes care of all the problems, and I ran the human resources, which is all the employees. So I had every single problem in the resort hit my desk. So I had a lot of story sources. So funny enough, my murder mysteries take place in a ski resort because lots of stuff happens there every single day, as I learned. So do you want me to just go ahead and share my spreadsheet and we'll have a look at it? And
I do, because I want to talk about how editing is, traditionally editing, at least from the editor perspective, was you had all of your experience with publishing and different things. So you have that experience, but you still had to go through a methodical method. Mm-hmm. And either you do it yourself with your self-editing, or you use a professional editor, and they're doing this. And Excel was the answer. But that being said, let me see here. Excel, and I looked it up on Google, and I can show you a little bit later, that quote here is Microsoft Excel is a spreadsheet application launched in 1985. And it allows you to perform mathematical functions on the data. So it's not really designed for, writing a book. But let's look at that, because I know that we've discussed a lot. I'm going to share your screen now.
Okay. No, I think I have to share. You have to stop, and I'll share because it's my screen. You can't share. I'll do it from here.
There you go. You do it.
I'm going to share, and then I'm going to go and find my Excel, and you're going to tell me if my Excel spreadsheet is showing up.
All right.
Can you see
Here
it?
Here it is. Yes, it is. So there it is.
Yeah, I just want to see if I can view bigger. Of course, I can't find my view.
I can make it full screen if you'd like.
For
a moment.
Sure, if you want. So the history behind this. So my history is not actually in creative writing. I have a degree in computer mathematics. And so I'm a very mathy analytical person. And when I was writing my novels, I read literally hundreds of books on how to write and studied them and made notes. And I first came up with a spreadsheet of everything I needed to know to edit a book. And then I thought, well, that's great. I can't remember any of that. It's too much. So then I decided I needed a spreadsheet that took everything I'd learned over the years and mapped it against my book. So what you're looking here at is my spreadsheet that I used for the first version of Descent, which was called Final Gate at the time, which my publisher changed the name on it. But anyway, what I had done is I put in every single scene. So if you see, you don't need to read this. I'll just scroll through what I'd done. So all of my scenes are in the book. And then I made a spreadsheet that showed me my chapter, my scene number, so I could see a structure of it. And my timing at the time to keep track of timing was I just put what day it was in the story. So I knew how many days went by. I named every scene. I listed who was the point of view. And this is my color coding here. So blue is Kaylin. She's the protagonist. Ben is her love interest. Gavin's just some other guy. And then down here, I listed orange as scenes that I was going to cut. So I kept them in the spreadsheet. But when I was revising, I realized I didn't actually need the scene. The light orange is think about cutting it or cutting it back. And as I continued down, I started to see patterns where for the point of view character, so chapter 11 has Kaylin and then Ian, and then on to chapter 12. So why is Ian's point of view stuck in there in the middle? I don't know, but it was at the time. But it gave me a way to visually see, and you can see here I've gone Jeff, Kaylin. There's another scene that's going to go that I didn't really have a plan for point of view. I was just writing how I thought the story should be written at that point without analyzing it. And so the spreadsheet, by color coding it, let me actually analyze it. Then I learned every scene must have a purpose. So I put down why I thought the character or the scene was in the story. And at this point in my writing, I didn't have the understanding I have now that there's much more depth to a purpose of a scene. And you have to include things like the story arc scenes. So you need to know when they actually happen. And in my whole spreadsheet, I put in one. I think I've got plot point 1 here bolded so I could find it. See, I can't even find it. That's how difficult it is. But somewhere down here, I had plot point 1. But that was the only story arc scene I listed. So I didn't even know at this point that I should be listing my story arc scenes and knowing where they happen. The next thing I looked at was setting. Then I looked at who was in the scene, which is where I learned you really need to know who was in each scene, and you need to know, do you need every character's in the scene? And then I looked at, well, when were they introed? So I could see, did I describe them or not? Because I had an issue with describing. So for me, that was an important element. Then I looked at what objects, so, you can keep track of them and know who knows about them because you know who's in the scene. I had a high level thing of what happens in the scene, what's revealed, the tension, description of where it is, clues, because I was writing a murder mystery. And here I had a little thing called what Kay knows, which is what Kaylin knows, because she wasn't in every scene and I had to keep track of what she actually learned. So then when she was and something was in a different scene, I didn't get confused and forget she didn't actually know it. And then what the reader knows about Kaylin. Here's where I started my first investigation into looking for patterns in how you start and end each scene. So this one started with action. This one started with dialogue. Then I added my time of day, the weather, and this has actually turned into Fictionary. It turned into action and sequel. And then I put how many pages, and I was doing 250 words. And then I decided that's not really useful. How many words are in the scene? So this is where I started drawing graphs. And here it was important that I looked at the balance in word count per scene. And so then I started drawing graphs, and this is what I came up with. So this is my word count per scene. You can see.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm not exactly a savvy drawer.
Let's look at this. Wow.
So there it is. But you can see right in the middle, there's one big scene here, and you think, well, what is that? So I kind of had to go figure out, well, okay, that's kind of in the middle, and then go back to my spreadsheet and go, where was that? Why is that scene so long compared to the others? And then
Oh my
I've
goodness.
got some, quite short scenes, but I had to figure out where they were so I could go and look at my pacing. So that's the general spreadsheet, and you can see I went through and I literally filled it out for every element for my story, and then I went back to my Word document. I had them both open on a screen. I was traveling at the time when I did this, so I only had my MacBook, and so it was really little on the two sides, and I was filling out, going down my MS Word document and putting, okay, this is scene one. Okay, what's happening? What are all these things? And as I did that, kept developing this spreadsheet and adding more things and taking things out, making it more useful for overall genres as opposed to mystery specific. Did a whole bunch of things, and this is what led into the Fictionary 38 story elements. So exactly. What I want to do is just stop sharing for a second. Oh. And then hang on, I'm going to go back to share because I have to go over to Google here.
No problem. No problem. I think this is really amazing. For those of us who are behind the scenes and those who use Storyteller or Story Coach, Storyteller is for the writers and Story Coach is for the editors, you start to see the patterns here. You see the word counts, you see the it's all coming there. So it's very fun to see this from the back end. But it's also quite amazing that this was it. This is what you had. You have track changes, which I don't remember. What did you say? What year did that come out? That came out around the same time, I think.
My book or Fictionary?
Track changes.
Oh, track changes came out in 1983.
Okay, so that's 83. I mean, some people on here aren't even born. Well, the things we're talking about.
No, don't okay? Say that. That's too frightening.
So we have 1983. Excel came out in 85, and then you're looking at Word, which is who knows what version of that was, and that's it. So you did that, and then you had all these books, which we also want to talk about in a moment. So remember, we want to talk about the books that really, how did we decide what to put on the Excel? So when you're ready to share your next one, you let me know.
Just a second. I just want to address one of the comments about Trello. So Trello is a very interesting piece of software to use for editing your book because you can use it. And if anybody follows the Writing Mastery Academy with Jessica Brody, who wrote Save the Cat, writes a novel, they have courses that really show you how to use Trello to edit your novel. And it's similar to using a spreadsheet, except it's graphically shown or visually shown different with little blocks that you can move around and put notes and add things and stuff. And it's just it's another tool that is out there. Obviously, I favor Fictionary because, I'm Fictionary, but there is lots of advice out there. If you are a Trello fan, there's lots of advice on how to use it. I mean, you can see Joellen just put up the 400-page sci-fi novel and use Trello, right? So it's the same kind of thing with the volume of a novel. It's really difficult. It's a cognitively complex task, and to keep track of all of it without a tool is really difficult. So with Trello, it's not that you can edit. It's the same thing as using a spreadsheet in that you keep your just notes on the side. And so you would have your, wherever you write, if it's Google Docs or Microsoft Word or Scrivener, it doesn't matter. You would keep the two up and you would have your Trello and update at scene one and put your action, and very similar to what I put in the spreadsheet, but you use Trello, same kind of thing. So what I wanted to show you now, can you see my word count per scene?
Let's see. Yes, I can.
Okay. So this is the actual novel, and you can see it was called The Final Gate at the time, and it's the copy that I submitted to my agent. I put Descent there to remind me it was Descent. And so I loaded it into Fictionary because I wanted to show you the difference between the spreadsheets. So here's that scene where I said there's one kind of around the middle that is, it's 2,100, almost 2,200 words. And that's really long for the type of story I write. If you look what's around it, it's, you know, quite short scenes, and that's just how I write. Lots of people write different ways, and it's not to say one's better than the other, it's just me. So here, you know, I look at this scene and think, okay, well, what is this scene? Why is it so long? And I think, oh, okay, so okay, I know what this scene is now. Kaylin is interviewing a bunch of the ski patrollers because she wants some info from what went on at night. And so you think, well, why is that so long? It's, you know, it's an interview scene. It's not a major scene in the book. It's giving a piece of information. And then as I go through and I look, I can see right here, it says it was still early and Kaylin wanted to speak with Nora before Nora left home for work. So what this means here is this is a great opportunity to go, okay, the location is changing in this story. So I could have ended this scene right here in a couple of days, boom, it's over. And then started it here. It was still early. So Kaylin's moving on to her next piece of the scene. And so when you find something, regardless of the tool you're using, but word count is a great thing to use for pacing and for balance and structure and how you're doing scenes and chapters. And so this is an easy way to go, okay, so this scene is really long. Why? And now I have a fix. I can go, all right, I'm going to split that into two scenes because it's too long for one scene. So when you're using tools, it's why with the Excel spreadsheet, the word count was one of the things that I chose to draw because you can't see it. Like you can read down a spreadsheet, but it's really hard to go, oh, there's one that's too long, or there's one that's too short. Or, you know, I have some writers write and they write all in like 2,000 word scenes. And then there's a few that aren't. You think, well, okay, address those. It's not right. And it's hard to see it. So you have to figure out a way to draw it.
Oh, there's a lot in there. There's a lot in there. But it wasn't just your mathematics that went into this. There was also all kinds of books and a whole library of things that you read that really helped set the premise. And that's helped you build Fictionary. And that's where I got excited because Christina shows up one day and says, you know, this is what I do. And when I loaded it in and the story arc came across, I was like, oh my goodness, you know, and I really thought, well, there's AI and I better be on the front of this. So that's how we've been working with Christina, and we actually went into the whole certification, and this is the software that you're seeing. This is the ones that professional editors use to make sure, and I think that this will be the wave of the future that all editors should be using. But there was a lot of books, and being in the background and knowing, you know, from the investor's point of view, show us the books, tell us about the library of information that goes into this, because it's not just that you're super smart, it's that you've read a lot.
Yeah, I did a lot of work, and it took us 2 years to really develop the formulas behind the story arc, to get it really nailed. And the reason it took a long time is because there's a lot of different ways stories can be told. And what we discovered over time is there's a baseline story arc with 5 key elements in it. So it's the inciting incident, plot point 1, the middle, plot point 2, and the climax. And every other type of story arc fits it. So it doesn't matter which one you're using. And if you study stories from literally the beginning of time, regardless of their epic poems, a play, you know, how things progressed over time, the different styles of novels, they all follow it. And all of the commercially successful stories, if you look at it, they're all in there. And by follow it, I mean, it's a form with a range. So it's not exactly, it has to happen at 10% or 20%. It's a range of things to have the key scenes appear in the story in the place where the brain wants to find them. And the human brain likes a story in a certain way, and it has forever. And so my recommendation to writers is to know that. And if you choose to break that, which writers do for very good reasons, and the stories work, at least understand why you're doing it.
Exactly.
So let me I'm going to go through the books because I've picked the ones. I mean, I have hundreds of them, and then I have my Kindle is loaded with, I try to read most writing books that are out there and most books on editing, because even if you learn one thing, it's worth it. So I have stacks and stacks of these things. But so I wanted to start with the books that show form. And how to, and in particular, if you're trying to edit your story from a high level story structure point of view, I thought I would start with the main ones out there, because typically either writers are just writing and then they're going to go and evaluate and figure out how they want to structure their story, or they have been studying and follow a type of form that will then fit into the story arc that we draw. So I'm going to start with Save the Cat. It's mirrored, I think. Wait, I got to figure out which way to move. So Save the Cat. It's by Jessica Brody, and she runs the Writing Mastery Academy. So she does a lot of in-depth theory and teaching. And Save the Cat has 15 beats, and 5 of those are within the 5 of the fictionary story arc. But the other 15 fit in. And so when you use something like Save the Cat, and the interesting thing is all kinds of genres are evaluated in this book on what are those key scenes. And she does all 15 beats, which you can within fictionary when you name your scenes. I actually took a book, one of mine, of course, and labeled all her beats within fictionary. And so she's got opening image and setup and things. And you can see down the side if you're actually really following the structure that she's recommending. And particularly if you go through one of her courses, you can see that, you know, as you're doing the course, you just fill it out in fictionary and you have it there. And then it shows you at the end, when you look at the purpose of scene insight within fictionary, you'll know exactly if you hit her percentages close enough or not. So that part's pretty cool, I thought. The next one, which I'm sure lots of you have heard about, is the Story Grid by Sean Coyne. So really well-known editor, has done many, many big name books, you know. So, I mean, there's so, like, it's a huge list of big name books he's done. But they have, let's see if I can just find it in here. But basically, their whole theory is based on a spreadsheet. And a lot of the things in that spreadsheet are also in fictionary. So if you follow the story grid method, it's another way. And I recommend reading both, because they look at books a little bit differently, and they each give you a little bit different parts of theory. Save the Cat does a lot more books, so your genre will be covered. Story Grid focuses a lot on Jodie and Famous Guy was in the movie. Terrible. Anyway, on one book that I just can't even, it's terrible. I can't remember.
Jodie and Famous Guy. We'll get back to you.
Where he's in jail and he's got the mouth thing on him. And
Silence of the Lambs.
Silence of the Lambs. Thank you. So they do an in-depth analysis of Silence of the Lambs based on their story grid. So it's very interesting. And so if you follow that theory, you can use that as well. The next book that I like is this one, which is Robert McGee, Story. And he's got, so his is based on movies, but a lot of the stuff in movies applies to novels. It just is based on minutes instead of word count. And so there's a ton of great information in here. And again, a lot of it you can then, if you want to use fictionary, you can do it. This one's a little harder, and I have an option for it. So this is the standard hero's journey with a bookmark. By Joseph Campbell. So it's a bit of a hard read. It's a much older book, and it talks about the historical relevance of structure and particularly with the hero. So then came this one, and it's The Writer's Journey by Christopher Vogler. And he's basically taken the hero's journey and put it in a much more readable fashion. And you can see I really like this one because I've written all over it and I have sticky marks of things, but it's another one to teach structure. So those are the key ones when you're looking at doing overall structure, regardless of the tool. So if you want to do it within an Excel spreadsheet or Trello or Fictionary, it's still important to understand what makes a really great structure in a story.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot going on here. I'm just answering some of the comments we're getting here at the same time. You know, the reason why we're talking about editing and we're going through all these books that, again, it may seem like we're looking at just editors' information. Actually, the more editing that you do, the better writer you become. And at some point, even if you don't want to do your own self-editing, you're going to have a conversation with one of us, and you really kind of need to understand the foundations, because there will be a point where we can do a lot. And I would say in the editing world, my particular editors do it for you most of the time. We do as much as we possibly can. We overdo it. So we're good at that. And I'm very proud of what we can do in those senses. So, but at some point, you still have to take our information back, and you have to be able to put that into revisions, and you have to understand why you're doing it and what the importance here. It's not subjective. There's a lot of hardcore objective things that you can learn, not only in syntax and grammar, spelling, punctuation, but we're talking about the actual story arc, the character development, the plot, the scenes, the different things that create the good storytelling, which is important not to your editor or even yourself as much as it is for your readers. And that's why we have it there. We're telling stories. So I just wanted to insert that there as you know, some people are, oh, well, why are we talking about editing? I'm a writer. You are. And when that ends, if you want somebody to read that, editors are there to help you. If you can have a conversation with them, it helps. It's like going into your doctor. If you have the basics, you walk away much more confident and less confused and frustrated. So, because you have to go through it regardless, it's just, it's symptomatic.
It is, it's really, really important for a writer to know how to self-edit.
Yes.
And at all levels, so that, whether you choose to self-publish and use an editor or not, you still want your best story out there. And, a great story is going to sell more books than a mediocre story.
Exactly.
A story with perfect grammar and punctuation is not going to sell if you don't have a great story. And so the editing portion is to be used after there's a draft. And so by draft, I mean, you've got a beginning, a middle, and an end. And with that, you have all of your story arc scenes. So you've got your inciting incident, plot point 1, middle, plot point 2, and your climax, your resolution, and all the connecting scenes. And so you're looking at, you've got your 60 to 120, 130,000 words written. The word count's not as important as you've got the main structure. And then the next step as a writer is to edit from a story level perspective. And the reason I say that is if you try and copy edit, you'll spend a lot of time fixing it and making your prose perfect. But then when you figure out that you're actually going to story edit, you have to, you're going to change a lot of things. You're going to rewrite scenes. And as I showed you in my spreadsheet, I cut whole scenes. And I also looked at maybe these have to be cut. And if not, the ones that were the light orange, they have to be absolutely rewritten. So it's really, really important for writers to understand the difference between story editing, line editing, copy editing, and then proofreading on the end, when to do each of them, and to be proficient at some level. Now, for me personally, I love story editing, and I work really hard at story editing my own books. I'm okay at copy editing, and I suck at proofreading. I cannot see it. It just, I would never try and proofread my own book. I know that about myself. Not a strength. I would never proofread somebody else's either, for that matter. But on the story editing side, that's my passion, and that's where I mean, that's where I live as a writer. And the other thing about doing a structural edit is that you, it's when you can get really creative. So it forces you to look at things and think, I don't have an entry hook for this scene. So, and an entry hook is just, why would the reader keep reading that scene? It's the start of a new scene. What's in there to entice them to think, I don't have an entry scene. So if I did, what would it be? How could I write it? Or maybe it's down later in my scene. I could pull it up earlier. Or, well, what happened if I had a dog run out in front of a car? What happened if her purse fell off the outside of a train? What happened, something. And so to me, the structural editing is one of the most creative parts of writing your story, because it's when you've got the hard work of drafting done. Now you can just play in your brain and ask yourself questions on how could it be better or more interesting or faster paced or higher tension.
Exactly. Exactly. So there's a lot going on there. And again, it all comes together, and it is a learning experience. You're not going to walk away. You know, Christina spent years reading those books and still reading those books. And, you know, I do this too. We and all of my editors, you know, you have to keep up to date. And I would say, you know, in the last decade, you know, everything's so changed because we've got Amazon and we're publishing and we're doing everything so fast. And that's the amazing part about there. I saw that. I have to show it because it's not fun for us to. So,
and I'm a dog lover. Dog.
We got a lot of comedians today.
Yeah.
So anyhow, but it's really, really important that you accept that this is a process. And, you know, editing as a whole, we talk about it as a journey. We do have an ebook. You can download it from either one of our websites that we wrote in regards to this. But inside that journey are different stages. And where you are is determined by what you're still doing. If you're still structurally organizing and putting things together, then you're going to be going into the structural editing of your story. And you can do that. One of the questions we had here was, do I need to use Storyteller or can I use Story Coach? Well, you can use a Story Coach when you get frustrated, or if you're a do-it-yourselfer and you love to do it, dig in, because you will learn so much. I mean, these are the tools that the editors are using. It has a fantastic library inside of it. It helps you cross-reference. And when you move on, then you can come to us or any other certified story coach and basically ask us, you know, can I proceed on to line editing or copy editing? Where am I? And if you're not, they can go in and fill in the differences. But if you're done it well, and many people do, then you proceed to the next level at no problem. And it's really important that you just know that your foundation is strong, super strong.
Yeah. And so I just want to be clear on that one point. So Storyteller is our product for writers who want to self-edit their own story. And Story Coach is our product for professional editors who are editing somebody else's story. Exactly. Storyteller is much less expensive than Story Coach. And so if you're a writer and you want to do your own story, then you want to be using Storyteller. And Story Coach, you're a professional editor and you're doing somebody else's, like Joellen's whole company, then you want to be using Story Coach. And the other comment I wanted to address was somebody said, can you lead a fictionary for editing during NaNoWriMo? So I mean, it's not been announced, but I am doing, I've joined with NaNoWriMo, and starting in January, I will be doing editing sessions for 6 months throughout 2022. And we're starting it then because we're assuming you're going to write your novel in November. You're going to be exhausted in December and you really don't want to be seeing me. But by January, you might feel like getting going again. And so we're going to do a whole host of free sessions. NaNoWriMo will announce them. And yeah, and so the idea there is when you write your draft in NaNoWriMo, and I've done 2, so I know exactly what it is. You write like crazy, and you got to do your 1,167 words, I think it is, a day to meet 50,000 words. And so you watch that graph grow, and the goal is word count, you get it done. But then you end up with some weird stuff in your story, right? And you got to edit it out and fix the story, but it gets you that draft done. So then you can creatively edit it. And then coming out of Nano, we thought, okay, well, let's give you 6 months to get through it and work on your book and edit it so that you got a bit of a break. So when you do Nano next year, you're ready to go again and you've got your ideas going and you have some time to plot or make your outline or whatever it is that you want to do for it. And so we'll go through a detailed, here's where you're going to start, here's what you do next, here's what you do next, to help people through it and get them, you know, so they get to a finished story.
It's very exciting. Very, very exciting. And again, you know, it is a long process that, you know, I guess if you can write a book in a month, you can definitely sit down and really grind into the editing too. But, you know, be kind to yourself. And I think it's a great goal for the next year to really get in there. We're starting to get some questions. Did we want to move on to the questions now? Because what we wanted to talk about was what you had to know, what you had to do to edit, which was our first task. What editing used to be, which is, again, back to the editing on Excel and track changes and Word and all those things. And basically these are used by both the writers and the editors. And the last one was the modern tools, which we slid into. Wasn't really planned for today. We were just going to mention it, but you kind of can't do it without looking at this. So we have a first question here. Was there anything else you wanted to address before we move into the questions?
Okay, great. Questions will lead us. That's great.
Okay, so we have the first question here is, what's the difference between copy editing and editing? And I can show here, I'm really struggling with my screen balance today, life balance. But we have a spiral that kind of shows how you start writing and then you edit and you have beta readers and you have editing and you do all these different things. And there's, as I was mentioning, there's different stages in the process. And if you're at the highest level and you're still structuring, and that means you can be moving chapters from point around here and there, then you're dealing with a structural edit. After that, you can go into a line edit, which is still making sure that your tone and your voice and it all flows very well. And it's basically the next level when you know that you want to be there, but it's when you're in revisional stages and you're really looking at the style and the consistency and all those little things that go in there. Copy editing is, going into, it still has style, but it's more or less your syntax, it's your grammar, your spelling, your punctuation. And that's where you can use these tools like Pro Writing Aid and others, because it more or less follows the rules. Sometimes it tells you to correct things that aren't necessarily right, but it's a robot. So, English is not an easy language. So I hope that kind of makes it clear. Did you want to, difference between copy editing and editing? It just says editing. Sorry, I missed that part.
No, I mean, that's a great explanation of the different types. And, with all that being said, the lines blur. That when you're story editing, or which is also structural editing, developmental editing, substantive editing, there's lots of words for it. We call it story editing because we're focused on fiction. Fiction is a story, as opposed to with nonfiction, a structural, developmental, substantive might make a little bit more sense, right? But when you're doing a story edit, the goal is focus mostly on the story edit. But of course, you're going to fix errors and you're going to proofread and copy it a little bit, of course. But that's not the main point. When you're doing line editing, you're really not doing any structural changes. You're not moving scenes around. You're not taking scenes out. That's done. And if it's not done, go back to story editing. Line editing is when you're at the paragraph level. You're going to be moving things up and down. When you're copy editing, you're no longer moving things. You're not rewriting sentences unless you've got repetitive words you find or stuff. What you're looking for is all of your grammar, your punctuation, your passive voice. Do you have too much? Do you need less? Whatever, at that level. And if you're finding you're having to reorganize a scene too much, you're still at the line editing phase. Go back, fix your scenes, come to copy editing. Proofreading, not really editing. You're not changing anything. All you're doing is someone with an eagle eye is looking for typos, mistakes, extra spaces, font that doesn't match. That's it. Like your book is done by the time you proofread.
Exactly. So the story is done. So we have another question here. Can an author not use Story Coach to self-edit their own book? Using a professional editor could be very expensive. Good point. This is why we're saying we have Storyteller, which is affordable for you. It's a subscription base. You can go in and check that out, fictionary.co, and I'll put that up in a banner here. And it is a very good point that editing is expensive. It's probably the most expensive step in the entire book process. So that's why when people say, well, why are we talking about editing? Because if you're going to pay that much money, it really, really behooves you to be able to talk with your editor in a knowledgeable way, to understand your challenges, to understand what they're referring to and why they will be making suggestions, to understand that there's both an objective and a subjective part to this process based on their experience, their training, what their publishing background, those different things, including their genre, including that they're being specially trained for line editing versus copy editing versus story editing. So there's a whole variety of things there. So yes, you can use Storyteller, and that is the same, more or less, the tool that we're using for editors. However, if you get frustrated at any point, then you can move over at that point and you've got it done. Or you go directly to line editing, which is a more affordable one if you're 100% sure that you're done with the structure and no longer organizing. Did I miss anything?
Well, I just want to clarify. I think I've read through some of the comments. I just want to back up a step. So Fictionary is my company. It's not the product.
Mhm.
And under the Fictionary umbrella, we have Fictionary Storyteller, and that's for it is similar to Story Coach in that as a writer yourself, what's in there is you're getting all the advice and the resources you need to edit your own story. And so it's the go-to place for a writer. Story Coach is the Fictionary product that a professional editor uses. And so it's got extra functionality that an editor needs to point things out to a writer. The writer doesn't need it to give it to themselves. So as a writer, it's not, okay, I own the company. I'm just going to say it's not worth the money as a writer to pay for Storyteller because you're getting the value you need on the story editing from Storyteller. And then also under the Fictionary umbrella, we've got our Fictionary Certified Story Coach program, which is where we teach and certify editors how to perform a story edit. And then we have our other courses for writers and for editors there. And so that's the overall Fictionary. And then you've got Storyteller, Story Coach, and courses. So hopefully that clears up all the questions that were coming in around that.
Sure. And I had some banners created just for those because it does get a little bit confusing, and that line editing comes after storytelling if you've done it completely, or having certified story coaches, which have gone through extensive training and have the background as professional editors and have, through our company, the satisfaction guarantee, they can do all of those 38 story elements and fill in 80% of those questions and really dig in on your behalf. And then you can go back in. You're still going to have to do the revisions. It's kind of like having a private or personal trainer. We can do a lot of the coordination and the organization for you, but you're still going to have to do the work yourself. So that kind of helps.
That's a really interesting point on the difference between when you hire an editor for story edit versus copy edit or proofread. So story edit, line edit kind of go together. You cannot do an accept all on track changes because the suggestions are for revising and rewriting the story. When you get to a copy and a proofread, I don't recommend doing an accept all because you don't know that the editor didn't make a mistake and we're all human. Yes. But that's where you're just accepting or rejecting changes. And so the work for a writer, when you use an editor, professional editor for story editing or line editing, is quite heavy after the editing process. So brace yourself because it's coming. Versus copy it and proofread, much easier because you're accepting and rejecting changes. So that's another little bit of a difference there. I wanted to address, there's a question here from KR that says, can you discuss ways to approach that first edit on the first draft? Should I begin by looking at story arc, scenes, plot points, etc.? And that's a great question. So regardless of what tool you use, it doesn't matter. The way you start a story edit after you have your draft written is you pick your 5 key scenes, the ones I keep repeating: inciting incident, plot point 1, middle, plot point 2, climax. And find them. Well, you got to know them. So 1, do you have them? And 2, where are they? Right? And the do you have them is more important. So you need to know the description of what those are, and you got to find them. You kind of look. Usually writers have them. They might even not know they have them if it's a first time concept through. But you find those and you position them. And then if you're using Save the Cat with its 15 beats, or you're using StoryGrid, or you're using the hero's journey, or you've picked up a book on your genre, so the romance genre or the mystery genre, you take the middle scenes and you label those in between. So in a romance, do you have the meet cute, which is all that is it's the inciting incident, meaning the love interest met. That's it, right? But there's expectations. And so for your genre expectations, label those. Do you have those? And that's your highest level structure. If the answer is no, go and fix it and go and rewrite that until you're happy with you've got that general story arc close enough. Doesn't have to be perfect, but sort of close. You think, okay, because you're going to revise, you can work with it. Then you go back and you work scene by scene and you work through your characters, your plot, and your settings. And you evaluate your scenes against all of the key things you need to evaluate. In Fictionary, we have 38 story elements that we use. And you evaluate your scenes on a scene by scene basis. Once you've done that, and this is going to take several iterations because typically you would pick a piece and do that and then go and do another piece. Some people do them all at once, but I think personally it's a bit overwhelming, just me. I like to do bits. But once you do all that, you've done all your scenes, now you have to go back and review your story arc and make sure all the key scenes are still there and that they're in the right place. And this is where the right place becomes really important, much more than at the beginning before you've done your revisions, that you're now looking at, is my inciting incident in the first 15% of the book, yes or no? If it's not, the story's going to drag in the opening and the reader's going to be thinking, well, where is that meet cute in my romance? I want it, right? Gotta have it. Come on. So back that up a little bit, which may mean cutting scenes or moving scenes or just reducing scenes, right? And then you look through the rest of your key scenes, and do you have them generally in the right place? And then once that's done, off you go to a line edit or a copy edit. So hopefully that answered that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we have another question here. Let me go ahead. I was just showing some of the conversations. We multitask too much in the world, so sorry, but I think we can handle it. So what areas of Storyteller overlap with Pro Writing Aid? And I think this is really great because we talk about them all the time, because we use Pro Writing Aid, you use Pro Writing Aid, everybody is kind of intermingling, and it's become a very, very productive triad of services in terms of, you can be inside Pro Writing Aid. For those of you who don't know, it's the copy editing software and tool, and it plugs into everything. It plugs into your email, it plugs into your G Drive, it plugs into your Word, everything you're doing, it's in there. And it's also managed to plug into quite a few other tools. And of course, Fictionary is one of those. And inside there, it's really great. It'll start correcting things inside there on your behalf. And then if at any point you get frustrated, there's a little button in there that says get a human editor, and that's us. So it kind of is, it's really cool. So the areas of Storyteller that overlap with Pro Writing Aid, do you want to talk about things in specific there?
Yeah, there isn't anything. So
everything.
Well, they don't overlap, right? They're complementary products in that Fictionary, Storyteller, and Story Coach are for story editing. You're looking at your story, not at the actual words. Well, you need to look at the words, but you're not looking at your commas, and you're not looking at repeated words, and that you're looking at the story structure. Pro Writing Aid is copy editing software and does a really good job. Again, it's like anything. It's like with using Fictionary, you still need to understand the concepts of a good story. Using Pro Writing Aid, you still need to understand the concepts of copy editing, and you need to make sure it's all natural language processing, right? So it's AI software, and so it's looking for context and trying to figure stuff out. And so sometimes in both of the softwares, like Pro Writing Aid might find a grammar error and say, you need a comma, but you really don't, right? You have to know that. And in Fictionary stuff, like when we're pulling out the point of view character, so some names are easy, it gets it dead on. Other names like April. So April, is it a month? April, is it a name? And then it starts using software to figure out, is it based on the context of the story, where does it fit? And so you have to know yourself, well, is that right or not? And so there's always an author responsibility that you can't sit back yet and rely on software to do it for you. The software is there to guide you, and you have to be careful that you don't get caught relying on it too much.
That's great. I do want to remind everyone to please subscribe to the YouTube channel below, so that you can join us in our next 3 series that we're doing, and that you can also follow us on the Eventbrite, because we will be sending out more information there. Do want to remind you that we will be sending this whole video once again with all the information. And if you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out directly to Christina at fictionary.co or myself at firstediting.com, and we'll be glad to help you. We are very personal. I think that's what makes us different from a lot of the companies out there. And as you saw, some of our editors are in here just popping in, and it's fun, and we like to hang out. So it's been a great time, and we appreciate you all being here. Christina, thank you for walking us through your journey in editing, and